And now for your listening pleasure, here's Pulizzi and Rose, covering the week of media, marketing, and digital content news. This Old Marketing. Take it away, boys.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to This Old Marketing, proudly brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. I'm Robert Rose, and welcome to episode number 410. 410 episodes of this nonsense for Friday, January 12th, 2024. And with me, as always, as he always is, my friend, my colleague, and let's just face it, a guy who's not going to get into the middle of this Jimmy Kimmel, Aaron Rodgers beef, Mr. Joe Pulizzi.
Isn't that the strangest thing?
It's good comedy. It's good comedy. That's for sure. I mean, there's a meme going around of Pat McAfee's face as Aaron Rodgers is going off on that, and it's just you could just see the discomfort in his eyes. Just like,
oh my God, yeah,
I can
like
see my career flashing before my eyes.
Yeah, as a sports broadcaster and podcaster, that's the last thing you want to do is have your guest take it off the rails into some political mess. By the way, for people that don't know, Pat McAfee's show is on ESPN.
Yeah,
and regularly has Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers on the show.
That was just weird for you to hear. Just by the way, that was just weird to hear.
Well, it's a regular
quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Okay,
yeah, exactly right. Regular guest on the show, and apparently, Aaron went off on Jimmy. Well, went off on the Epstein thing, the list, the pedophilia, all that stuff, and then mentioned that Jimmy Kimmel is going to be concerned about this. Well, Jimmy Kimmel did not sit back and just take this. He did not. And he said, "You've got no proof on this." And then it went back and forth. And then ESPN got involved. A number of people, I think, really concerned about Aaron Rodgers, putting his conspiracy theories on ESPN's network. Yeah. And I think as of we're recording this right now, McAfee has said that Aaron is not coming back to the show anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little bit of a misnomer, right? Because the show is done. The show is done for this season.
Because he's done with his season, so he's not coming in for his regular.
Right. He won't be on next week, folks. We won't be here either, but he won't be on next week.
No, we're going to talk about this later in the episode, but it's really interesting how powerful and influential these content creators are. And actually the decision that ESPN made back when they made all these cutbacks on their regular talent and then pulled a professional podcaster in that already had a show into the ESPN lineup of shows, and it's become very popular.
So here it's also a caution. I mean, and yes, we'll get to it. I mean, we have a whole chunky piece for this coming up, but it's also a commentary on influencers, because let's not forget that Pat McAfee, nobody knew who the hell he was, and
he had his pretty powerful.
No, hold on. I'll get.
Yeah,
no. What I'm saying is that nobody knew who he was. He sort of came out of nowhere with his YouTube show and his podcast. But one of the main reasons that his YouTube channel and his podcast got to be as successful as it was because he had Aaron Rodgers on the show just about every week, and Aaron would say something, have some pithy comment about football. Yeah, well, he would talk about football. I mean, he would talk about sports and offer up commentary on what's going on in the NFL and what you think about this and what during his whole was he going to go to the Jets? Was he not going to go to the Jets? Yeah. All that stuff gave him tons of audience, and you got to figure at that point McAfee's going, yes, this is great for my business. But then your main sort of regular guest star basically turns out to be, a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And, it goes awry quickly.
So I guess the question is, once the season starts, I'm assuming Aaron Rodgers is coming back to the Jets and will start, if he's healthy, the home opener of 24.
Right.
Do you think that McAfee will then have him back on? I think probably by that time the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think that would be my guess, is that they'll at least test it to see if people remember, because people, I mean, Aaron Rodgers was in the news it was about this time last year for his, was it last year or the year before? Either last year or the year before, about his when he lied about, getting vaccinated.
Oh, the vaccine. Well, that's
Yeah.
I think he
Yeah.
should run for president.
I
think that's the only sane
he
thing
fits
that
right
could
into the
happen.
platform, that's for sure.
It could really, exactly. Well, before we get on to our show, we've got a lot to cover this
We do
week.
have a good show.
It's funny. New year, everybody comes out with their news
Yeah.
and crazy things happen. But we must talk about football. So for those
For a
people,
second, for a moment.
for those of our listeners that don't like when we talk about the NFL, you can forward ahead 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about this, because this is something that hasn't happened in a long time, where the Cowboys and the Browns are both in the playoffs.
That's right.
It's a big deal. Now you have a home matchup because
that's correct.
Philadelphia just disintegrated in front of our eyes.
I don't know what's happened to Philadelphia. They have just imploded. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's been kind of fun to watch, but yeah.
Maybe they're just not. Well, we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Hey, can you visualize, or do you know of another sideline that looks more miserable than the Eagles? They're all upset. Yeah. They all look like somebody peed in their Cheerios. I mean,
that's right.
It's just like, what is wrong with all you people?
They all have resting sad face. I mean, for sure. Yes, they all have resting sad face.
But who are you playing? Give the rundown and your 30-second spiel on what's going to happen with the Cowboys.
All right. Game. So, well, because of the Eagles meltdown, the Cowboys, and because they won, and I don't want to hear it. Don't at me about the whole end of the Detroit game. It's just yeah. So, right. Because of that, the Cowboys have the number 2 seed, which means they get a home game and multiple home games if they win.
Yes, that's right.
They'll play the Green Bay Packers, because the Green Bay Packers, of course, have been on a hot streak. They've won. And the LA Rams also got into the playoffs, but they because of the rankings,
and they play the Lions.
They go off and play the Lions. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So it's a home game. Cowboys fans are super happy about that. We are undefeated at home over the last 2 seasons, so we're 16-0 right now in the home games. So home games are hugely important. Everybody seems to think this is a game that, they're, Packers are the number 7 seed. So they're basically, it should be a very winnable game. Let's put it that way. And then if they win, they get another home game against, I always get a little confused with this. I think they get whoever wins the Detroit and Rams. And that should be Detroit. So probably a rematch from Detroit is in order for 2 weeks.
And I bet you the Lions will be. I honestly, and I really want the Lions to win because they're the underdog and they haven't been there in forever. Yeah. But I really feel the Rams are going to win that game. So sorry to my Detroit fans out there.
They might. The Rams are playing very well.
Rams are playing hot. And we played them recently too. And they're for real, and they've got their wide receivers back, and they got that new rookie.
The rookie running back is just on fire right now.
Well, the running back and the receiver, they've got they're very, very talented. So we'll see what happens there. So the 5th seed, even though we had the 2nd best record in the AFC, tied for, we go to the 5th seed because the Ravens won the division.
Of course,
and the Cleveland Browns got the 5th seed, first wild card position, and they will be at the Houston Texans. With CJ Stroud leading the way, and we'll see what happens. Behind our savior Joe Flacco. What should we expect? I'm expecting a win. I believe that the Browns are the better team.
Yeah, they are.
I believe if the Browns have if the Browns have all their they're healthy. If they're healthy and they're all working well as a team, I think they can beat anybody in the league right now. But the Browns may be Browns, and we'll see what happens. So fingers crossed. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to root for the Steelers to beat the Bills. Because we want, if
they're not going to, but it would be fun. It'll be fun.
It would be great because there's a I would love to see a home game.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get there because all I want to do is win this game in Houston, the first game up Houston Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time.
There you go.
So we'll see. I'm gonna say it's gonna close. I'm gonna say Browns 34, Texans 28.
Okay,
is what I'm feeling.
All right.
I would love to say it'd be like 41-2, but that never happens with the Browns. It's always close.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're thinking 49ers Cowboys for the NFC Championship game.
You know, I'm actually hoping it's not, but yes, I would like to see the 49ers get eliminated before then. And because of the seeding and the way things work, that's really the only time we would face them is if both of us got to NFC Championship game. So I would love to see one of the teams along the way take out the 49ers, but they're just a great team. They're just a great team.
If they don't have any,
if they didn't have that
deficiencies,
a-hole Kittle on the team, I would like them a lot more.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is Kittle doesn't like the Cowboys either.
No, he does not. That is clear. That is clear.
Okay.
He has a T-shirt and everything. So yeah.
No, the last thing I'll say about it, did you see the weather in Kansas City for the Kansas City Miami game? They said there's a chance it's going to be the coldest game ever played in Kansas City.
Oh my gosh.
That's got to be really cold.
There you go.
So good luck to those people going to that game.
Yeah.
Brody might be going.
I have to imagine all those guys are going.
Big
for
Chiefs
sure.
fan. Yeah. So anyways. So that's it.
That's it. All right. Yeah, let's get to a show. Here? We went to exactly 5 minutes there, so to talk about the NFL. So those of you who fast forward, welcome back. And
you other listeners,
we've got a great and wonderful show for you, chock full of news here. We will talk a little bit about CES. Because CES has been going on all week, and we're going to talk a little bit about AI and influencers and media, which is kind of a new thing for CES. And we're going to pair that with a really interesting story on how creators and the business model is changing here in 2024. And basically, does the creator need the business or does the business need the creator? And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Then we will talk about Netflix and Amazon and all of the streaming networks that seem to be in cost-cutting mode, just like at the early part of last year. We saw all the tech companies starting to cut costs. Well, we're starting to see a similar trend now with all the streaming platforms, which should surprise exactly no one. Then, if we have time, we will talk about CNBC and how they're starting to offer online education. Yeah, that's a news channel offering online education. We'll get to a question. One of our friends and family of the show has asked us a question that we'll take from the audience. And, of course, then we'll get to our Rants and Raves, where I will have some commentary about the deprecation of the third-party cookie from Google. And surprise. I mean, you shouldn't be surprised that I'm talking about that. And then Joe will talk about a new women's-only sports bar and perhaps rant a little bit about the article itself that sort of mentions this thing. So a fun show full of media.
Great show.
We're done with football.
2024 show.
Yeah, exactly. It should be a great way to... All right, let's get to our first story and jump right in. And it comes to us courtesy of Digiday. And basically, we've got two stories, as I mentioned, to pair here. The first one is about Digiday, and it's CES 24 kicks off with a rapidly expanding impact of AI, media, and the marketing front. And basically the article, well, as it opens up, it says it will surprise no one attending the 2024 Consumer Electronics Show. By the way, the Consumer Electronics Show is just huge this year. It's always big, but it's just absolutely huge.
Is it bigger than, is it hitting records here? Like how big are we?
I have not heard any attendance records, but I do know that it is really big. I want
to check on that. I want to see if it's back to like 2019.
Yeah.
Numbers or something. Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, it opens up and says AI will be stealing the spotlight this week. But interestingly, a number of the AI providers are not there. Namely, Microsoft isn't there. They're just doing a little microsite, and basically a number of the other major AI players aren't there. But there are some there, including Amazon, etc. And it says while CES 2024 will have dozens of sessions related to AI, there are also plenty of AI talks about marketing, social media, entertainment, and media media, of course. And then basically the ubiquity of AI is talked about a little bit, but then they get into the idea of marketing and media being there. And Omnicom is actually highlighting influencers and creators as its CES focus. And that's a fascinating new idea here, where Omnicom is coming in and talking about the world of content creators, coming in and talking about influencers. And they're basically launching this big study that they did at the end of last year to talk about the idea of how it's connecting its agency and its services into the influencer and content creator marketplace. So we'll pair that, and then I'm going to get Joe's take on all of this. We're going to pair that with another story that comes out of one of our favorite newsletters, which is a media operator. And the newsletter itself starts off with basically a question of what's next for the messenger. And it talks about the messenger being out of time and nearly out of money and all of that. But then it gets into a really interesting discussion, which pairs well with this CES thing, which talks about the creators and carrying key person risks. And as the newsletter says, there's a good story in Semaphore about the struggles of a media company Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith own. Westbrook having been since has been having since the slap, which I love the fact that he capitalized that. That's of course the Oscars slap about almost exactly a year ago, and basically they say that it's struggling. The show is struggling, and they acknowledge that. And some of that has to do with that. Is it the people that people are coming to see, or is it the show or the business or the media company that people are coming to see? And as he says here in his newsletter, the argument has always been that people like people. And so the creator economy has the belief that an audience would feel a much tighter connection to said creator, thus making it a stronger business. And yet, a creator is a key person. In other words, there's massive key person risk where one or few people possess all the knowledge or skills with a creator business. So basically, and he uses himself as an example, he says, if I leave a media operator, the business is dead. So the problem is basically that the key person in a content creator kind of business weakens the company, because there is all the risk is basically borne by your one key asset, which of course is the person. It's a fascinating thing in the context of everything we just talked about with Pat McAfee and the show and all of that. And also certainly has to do with Omnicom and their influencer and all of that sort of coming together. So bringing all those sort of points of data together, Joe, what is your take on the content creator business and where and how to sort of, I guess, mitigate that risk or create that value or whatever the sort of mandate is here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a discussion with a bunch of content entrepreneurs, and we were talking about the difference between the creator business and a media business in and of itself. And from a business model standpoint, you and I know there's no difference at all. It's the same thing. You build an audience that knows, likes, and trusts you. You build some kind of a base that's a podcast, newsletter, whatever. And then you drive revenue mostly through media type revenue channels, like sponsorship or events or subscriptions or whatever. So that's what a media business does. And we'll talk more about that later. The difference is that a media company has multiple voices. That's really it. So if you look at risk, and you just have a creator, one creator, and whether or not that creator believes they're a media company or not, if you're just one creator, you're probably not a media business.
Right.
Because you don't have an asset outside yourself. And you and I know this really well. I mean, when we were, when I said, hey, I want to sell Content Marketing Institute, we talked about is Joe too much part of the business, and will somebody want to purchase CMI because it might be the Joe show? Well, lucky it wasn't. and CMI's just done just fine without me, and that's how you build an asset. You bring in other voices. Like you had very strong voice on the podcast with your regular columns in CMI. We had a number of wonderful editors and guest contributors, and it all worked together as sort of a community of creators, if you will. And I think that if you're a creator today, you need to be thinking about, how do I get to a media business model as quickly as possible? What's interesting about what Omnicom is doing is they're basically saying, okay, well, we're not going to put our all our assets into one basket, if you will. We're going to diversify across and bring in a number of influencers and show how important we are, and sort of bring in all the partnerships, all the distribution deals, and give them to a number of creators. It's the same thing. That one of the reasons why that we joined the HubSpot podcast network is because the belief is that HubSpot has a little bit more to offer because they have more systems in place, they have more relationships in place, and then we can come in as one of their creators and they can diversify across 50 different ones. So it's just interesting the way that this goes. And of course, the Smith, Jada and Will Smith company, if you will, media company, most of those deals have Will Smith in the background as sort of a key player.
Sure.
So of course, streaming got hit, as the article talks about. Streaming got hit across the board, and their revenues got hit across the board because of that, but also because of the fact that that creator, Will Smith in this case, is connected with every piece of asset in that media company. So you're really not diversifying. So I think if you're creating a media company today, you have to be really serious about, okay, are we tied to any one creator? And back to your point about Pat McAfee. Now, it's super interesting to me. The article talks about Tucker Carlson's having some problems in building an audience outside of Fox. Well, look at the two models. Pat McAfee built an audience first outside of a major news network, and then comes into ESPN and grows significantly because of it. Tucker Carlson had a big audience because of Fox, gets off of Fox, has trouble building his own audience because his audience is back watching Fox on television and not like going to new channels where Tucker is producing his content. So it's really interesting. And so I can see a media company being built from a number of influencers and creators that have first built their own audiences and then come together to build something great. But if you are a traditional media person and then you're saying, oh, I'm going to come off of that media site, I'm going to come off of that distribution and build my own network, that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Well, and you said it well, right? Because if you look at the Pat McAfee versus Tucker Carlson and I'm sure this is the first time anywhere somebody has used these two in a singular case study. So but fascinating nonetheless. But if you look at Pat McAfee and Tucker Carlson, one went one way and one went the other way, right? In other words, they both had audiences, but one tried to take the audience out of the media company to build something, and then one took his audience that he had built into something, right? And so one is much easier than the other. In other words, it is much easier for a Pat McAfee to take an audience and make it part of a larger group, a larger network, if you will, of other content creators than it is for a content creator to move out of an independent a network and become independent and start to build a media company, right? So one way is easy, and neither is easy, but one is easier than the other. And so the key, and I think this is what you're really getting at, is as if you're in either situation, you need to make a decision about what it is you want to do from a business standpoint, right? You need to actually ask yourself, because there comes a time where you will want to make one of those decisions, right? If you're part of a larger, let's say, you're a relatively well thought out influencer, well-known person within a larger organization. And we know plenty of those people, right? That were quote unquote thought leader or mini celebrities within a big company, Scott Monty, for example, when he was at Ford, and all of those things. When you're a larger than life personality within a big company, and then you move out to become your own, that's one thing, right? To build because in many ways, that platform, you will take some audience with you, but the major goal then becomes to how do you start rallying people around your, becoming your audience, not the audience of the network that you were part of, and your audience. And that's the problem that Tucker faces right now, is that what he's realizing, and I think what, I don't know if he's realizing it or not, but what you can observe is that it's hard that those Fox audience members are loyal to Fox, not necessarily Tucker. And the other
and they're
side
loyal
is,
to the
yeah,
they're loyal to the way they engage with content. I think
right.
it's a
It's
bigger thing. They're not going to
better,
change their
yes.
habits.
Much better. That's said much better. That you said that much better. And so, but the other way, then you look at Pat McAfee, who built a very loyal audience to him, his brand, his show, and basically, created YouTube, created a podcast, did all the things, pulling it into a network, basically gives the network the opportunity to then, you know, integrate that audience into the broader audience. And that is also a challenge because we've seen that fail too. And a great case study of that is Casey Neistat, right? Who had this amazingly huge audience and still does, I would suspect, for as an independent, but you bring him into CNN and he becomes part of CNN and it didn't work at all. And that's it's just a really interesting dynamic and one to think about as you're building your business.
Well, and I think that CNN tried to change some of the things that Casey was doing, and that
Exactly.
was the downfall.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think if Casey was allowed to be Casey,
Yes.
not that I know the particulars of that deal, I think it would have been more successful. And that's, by the way, I think why Pat McAfee has been so successful with ESPN, because he basically kept being Pat McAfee.
That's right.
And I think what's really interesting about what ESPN did there is they got rid of a lot of their high-priced talent, and they said, okay, well, let's go find. They didn't have to spend a lot of money to get Pat McAfee wanted the distribution.
Right.
It's like, great, we'll take Pat McAfee. We don't have to pay some of these people millions of dollars a year, bring them in, and we've just saved a ton of money. And we've added a whole new audience chunk. I mean, the media companies of tomorrow are just a collection of creator influencers.
That's right. That's right. And it's why Joe Rogan, basically why Joe Rogan worked, right? Because Spotify let Joe be Joe, right? Independent of what you think of Joe Rogan, that's what they did. They just sort of let him be, they just sort of set him loose and basically started to realize the benefits of the huge audience that he had and the audience acquisition that they could do. They could start to leverage now that they had him sort of exclusive.
Exactly. So yeah, it's interesting to see. But the only thing that I have to correct you on is that you said it's easier for somebody like Pat McAfee. I mean, that the model creating an audience from basically nothing is really, really hard.
No. I don't mean it's easy. No. I don't mean it's easier to create an audience.
Once you're there, and you have the audience.
My point is that it's easier to make one transition than the other. Yes. In other words, if you have an audience, it's much easier to make the transition into a network, as long as the network allows you to be you and allows the brand to be the brand and basically integrates you in the right way. It's much harder, I would argue, to make the transition from you're a Tucker Carlson and you're part of a network and you're trying to break out on your own because just to your point, you have to start all over again, basically.
Yeah. I think the one thing, the marketing angle with this thing that I wanted to get your take on is I don't think enough. You have a lot of brands out there that are spending money on content marketing initiatives and they're building up their internal influencers, but I don't think that they're seeing the opportunities with traditional media to say, oh, okay, let's say you're Autodesk and you've got an amazing influencer there that's got a great podcast and doing really well. Well, wouldn't that be an opportunity to look at some of the engineering publications out there and raise that up a level and get them involved as not just the Autodesk spokesperson, but somebody that can speak for the entire industry as part of a media channel? That hasn't been done before in most cases because people think it's a slant, but you have more and more like real media representatives that are talking about both sides, and they're not just pitching product anymore.
I think it's been really. I mean, you've seen that, right? They're in the B2B world. You've seen that. So Salesforce is a great example of that. LinkedIn also did it in many ways. So Salesforce is one I know a little better, where they built a network of, let's call them celebrity sort of thought leaders, right?
Yeah.
And I think their titles were like evangelist or, that sort of thing. And they became sort of the evangelist of whatever the point of view of the company was. And I think that's part of the problem is that there wasn't really a clarity in terms of that story, what the story was going to be, what the brand was going to be, and how they were going to approach it. It was all a bit fuzzy. And so, but that's the idea that they tried, right? And there was a number of them. Brian Solis was one for a while. Matthew Sweezy was one for a while. And so the idea was they would write books. write articles for Harvard Business Review. They would speak at conferences. They would be, they would write for other publications, and they would talk about the things that the business wanted to talk about, but not necessarily, in a salesy or marketing way. They would become the sort of celebrities, if you will, of that business. And of that approach. And I think it's worked with very mixed results for most companies.
I would agree with you. It's been most of the cases it's not succeeded because I think most brands take a short-term perspective.
Agreed.
And they don't commit to it.
That's
Matthew
right.
Sweezy is a really good example of that. I thought Salesforce had something down with that. Matthew was really a wonderful thought leader in the Web3 space. And then all of a sudden Salesforce said, we're going to go a different direction.
That's right.
Screw the years that we put into that one.
Yes.
Even though they had the book and the speaking and everything was working great. Now Matthew's doing fine without Salesforce, but
of course they're all are. They're all doing fine. Yeah. Because they're great content creators. Yeah.
And it comes back to the same thing. You have most of these companies, publicly traded companies, they're only looking 9 to 12 months out, if they're looking outside the quarter. And they're not saying, hey, let's invest in this program for 3 to 5 years.
Right.
They're not doing that. They won't do that.
Or leaning in and committing to it, right? Like really going all in on it, right? In other words, really trying to build up those people, and that's a hard thing for a business to do. Let me be perfectly clear. It's a hard thing for business to do because going all in and leaning in on it means, in a weird way, marketing them like you would a product, right? You have to put the promotion and the effort into marketing those people. And as we've talked about, that is a real risk because, again, you have the Aaron Rodgers effect, right? What happens if those people go suddenly off the rails and, start doing, and a lot of those companies just don't have that appetite for risk to sink that much investment into people that they ultimately don't control.
Correct. And the ones that do take that risk, I think, are the ones that are going to benefit.
I think that's true.
It won't work out every once in a while, and nothing ever does.
Yeah.
But I think especially those B2B companies out there that say, hey, we're going to look at some of these internal creators and put marketing behind them.
Yes.
Behind getting their books out and getting them on the speaking tour and getting them placed in media. I think those are going to see they're going to reap the rewards because most companies won't do that.
100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. All right.
Well, fun.
Well, speaking of promotions and, getting everybody out there and investing and doubling down, we probably should double down and pay a couple of bills here, don't you think?
Let's pay the bills.
All right. Your sales software should not be a bummer. When you step inside your CRM, you should feel equipped to do your best work. That's the magic of HubSpot Sales Hub. The new Sales Hub is designed to help you win. With an intuitive prospecting workspace and AI-powered tools to reduce your workload, closing big deals is no big deal at all. Get AI-powered tools like ChatSpot that are tailor-made to help you automate steps across the sales pipeline so teams can take back their time and spend it on more impactful tasks. Close more deals and get on track for your best Q1 yet. Learn about HubSpot Sales Hub at HubSpot.com/sales. Want a great new podcast for 2024? Well, try Truth, Lies, and Workplace Culture, brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. Truth, Lies, and Workplace Culture, well, it features husband and wife team Al and Leanne Elliott as they dispel myths, impart wisdom, and answer all your questions about finding, keeping, and motivating great people. Just like Joe and I, one of their recent episodes featured their predictions about what trends will dominate the 2024 workplace. You can follow Truth, Lies, and Workplace Culture wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Let me tell you about StreamYard. Yeah, StreamYard. It's the easiest way to create content, and it's right in your browser. You can multi-stream to your social media platforms, host a weekly show with special guests, create webinars, record podcasts with local recordings, create videos, and so much more. I mean, you might even start a show with your friend, and 10 years later, here you are still doing the same darn thing. That's right, StreamYard makes it simple to get professional and polished content every single time. Joe and I have been using StreamYard for This Old Marketing and the YouTube channel, as well as live streaming to LinkedIn. We never knew how easy it could actually be. Just go to StreamYard.com/thetilt and receive a lifetime, that's right, a lifetime discount.
I could cut that ad off sooner, but I gotta wait for the end because I gotta get the last. Yeah, like Mike. If I got to be like Mike, that's what I think of at the end? I always think of it's a Nike commercial, something like that. Yeah,
it's an earworm. It gets into your head for sure.
It's just such a fun, and not to talk up StreamYard anymore, but I mean we're having some. I mean our YouTube channel, I feel like it's really starting to move.
It's cooking a little bit. Yeah,
it's cooking.
It's starting to cook.
Get more subscribers. We've got our shorts.
Kelsey Brothers, here we come. That's what I'm just saying.
We're going for them. We're actually looking at that Kelsey Brothers model. There. What's their podcast called? New Heights.
New Heights. It's a fantastic podcast. And the funny thing is that I have not to get into football again. So of all the Eagles players, he is my favorite of that because he's an amazing player first of all, and basically he's really the only guy I root for, and he's just so entertaining on his podcast. And then of course the younger brother Jason is or Travis rather. Sorry. Travis
Swift.
Travis Swift, is basically he's funny too, and I love Kansas City as a team, mostly because I have such a fondness for Andy Reid, the coach there. But Travis Kelce's great. He's great.
Don't you?
Their podcast is amazing.
Don't you like Jalen? Hulu has live sports. Don't you like? I love that. Jalen Hurts.
No.
Did you ever see that commercial?
No.
Oh my God. So it's whatever, but Jalen Hurts is the quarterback for.
Of course,
they take the back of his jersey and they pull it off, and it's Hulu has live sports, and they say, okay, you gotta see it, because it's hard to describe. But he did a whole commercial. Baker Mayfield started it, and then Jalen Hurts took it over.
Okay.
Hey, did you know Hulu has live sports? The HUR.
Does he have sad face in that commercial? Because he's always got sad faces.
He's very serious.
Always sad.
It's a very serious Hulu has live sports.
I see.
Commercial.
All right.
So, anyways, we'll see for that. But yeah, there you go. All right. What's next?
There you have it. All right. Let's talk about streaming media, shall we? And a couple of stories that we'll pair together here. The first one on Netflix. This comes to us courtesy of Bloomberg. And basically, Netflix has announced that they're cutting over 100 shows in a major programming shift. I mean, so first of all, the fact that 100 shows is a percentage of their shows is already amazing. But anyway, the article opens up by saying, over the last 18 months, we have grown accustomed to hearing about cuts at almost every major media company. Walt Disney has fired thousands, trimmed billions from its budget. Warner Brothers Discovery has done the same, albeit at a smaller scale. This purge in many ways started with Netflix, which lost customers in the first half of 2022. But while its peers have talked about how much they would cut back on programming, Netflix has not. It cut some staff, stopped growing its budget, but it really didn't do a big purge. Well, it turns out even the unquenchable Netflix is starting to make less. As I don't know why he's writers. The fact that he actually has to write the sentence, we'll have more on that in a moment, as always. Anyway, basically, the article goes on to after the break. For some reason, that basically Netflix is going to cut more than 100 shows from its slate, and 100 shows is a lot. And basically, the company released about 130 fewer original programs in 2023 than the year before. It's a dip of 16%. So after increasing the number of new original programs for the last decade, output fell in every quarter last year. Netflix released fewer movies, TV shows, documentaries, and stand-up specials in the final 3 months of 2023. And they're going to continue to do this. Basically said there's one obvious reason for this decline. While the company has said the strikes by writers and actors didn't impact its slate much, output fell off a bit more than the second half than the first. 60 fewer series in the second half of last year, et cetera, et cetera. And basically the article goes on to talk about how this is literally, this should surprise no one.
Yep.
Because it has been expected for some time. The actors' strike certainly has an effect on this, but more than anything else, this is it was an unsustainable model of growth in terms of the content being acquired and or created, and the billions getting spent on it, with the amount of subscribers and streaming subscriptions that there are out there in the world. So we'll pair this basically with another story that I'll cover very quickly here. Fascinatingly enough, again, with the news, I'm going to read from a Wall Street Journal, and Joe is going to show Insider.
I'm showing a Business Insider because I have access to Business Insider, and I don't have access.
And I have access to Wall Street Journal, and I refuse to get a subscription to Business Insider because I think they're hacks. Yeah. But that's
praise for gated content.
There we go.
Thank you, media companies.
Yeah, there you have it. So Amazon is basically eliminating hundreds of jobs across film, television studios, Twitch streaming platform, all in an effort to rein in costs. And that article basically goes on to talk about how, in a very similar, almost identical way that we just talked about with Netflix, that they're cutting back on costs because of the unsustainable growth model there. And it's interesting to me, mostly because for Twitch, Amazon Prime, video streaming, it's a much different model than it is for Netflix. And so this surprises, if I was not at all surprised that Netflix is doing this, it really doesn't surprise me that Amazon is doing this, because this is a marketing program for them, and it's doing fine. It's doing great in terms of what it's doing. So this is easy for them to start removing some of the duplication that they got from their acquisitions and from MGM, for example, and getting rid of some of the duplication that they had from Twitch and all of that, and sort of just streamlining the operations a lot. So it's very much expected. What do you think about all this and what it means for streaming media networks?
Well, it reminds me, I was at National Manufacturing Week in Chicago in 2000. So let's go back 24 years. And it was boom times in manufacturing.
Yeah.
And that year, everyone got the biggest booth they could. And they brought in more people than ever before. And everybody was over investing in their marketing at that time. Well, 2001, 02 hit. We went into a little bit of a recession, if you will. And everybody then went back to what they were doing before with and not over investing. You and I talk about this all the time. They right sized the business at that point.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, when you have so much money and there's so much, I don't know what it is, over enthusiastic belief in what you're going to do from that standpoint. There's only so much money that people can spend on streaming. So everyone's cutting back a little bit. So that's one story. So you're going to see it over and over, and you have been, right? You've got Netflix cutting back. And now that everyone else is cutting, Netflix is owning that whole territory. They can do whatever they want to, except for the fact that I think their biggest competition is TikTok.
Yeah.
And I don't know of how many people we've talked about that on this show. I don't think a lot of people are thinking about it. TikTok has multiple revenue streams, and Netflix doesn't have that opportunity yet. First of all, Netflix is fine. They're doing just fine. They're almost at an all-time high from a stock price. Revenues, profits are at an all-time high. That's not an issue. I'm thinking a couple of years down the road, as TikTok gets even more influential than they are now, they've got not only the sponsored revenue stream, they've got retail. I mean, their shopping is going to boom and take off, and then Amazon's going to be concerned about them if they aren't already. So I think Netflix has to move around some of these assets to figure out how in the long term they're going to have to deal with surging TikTok, and I don't know what they're going to do. So that's kind of a separate issue. But it's amazing to me that you've got, who's not mentioned? Apple TV Plus. They barely generate any content on that at all, and they're still getting people to sign up for it. I mean, if you look at their shows, they rarely have a new show.
That's right.
It's like once every couple weeks if they have a new show. While you have Netflix has 5 new shows a day, and they're bringing in all sorts of new content. So it's just interesting.
Well, and again, this gets to why it's so surprising, it's not so surprising for Netflix, but even more not so for Amazon, because Apple's the same way, right? If for Apple TV is literally content that feeds hardware sales. So in many ways, you can say it's slightly different. It's not really a marketing play for getting people to sign up, but it is getting people to stay loyal to Apple hardware, right? And so that it's very much like the App Store for them. It's all about content that is only available through Apple hardware, and so that's their goal there, is to create that relationship with that audience that is stronger than just a hardware purchase. And so it makes no sense for them to try and compete against the Netflixes of the world, because they just won't compete there, and they don't have to. They're not built to do that. They don't have to do that. It doesn't have to be, it can be a smaller success for them. And so as long as they sort of stick to their Apple brand and put in, critically acclaimed, and, sort of stick to their content guns there, it becomes a very clear strategy for them. And I think for the others, the Disneys, I think Disney is actually in the most interesting position here, right? Because they have some big decisions to make this year in terms of what's going to happen, right? The stock is low, I think all-time low as we talk about this. And if they don't start doing something, right, and making things happen, and it's woefully undervalued, I would say.
Yeah.
Your predictions of acquisition, certainly not by Apple, but your predictions of acquisition are almost certainly going to come true at some point, because they have to do something this year, or and so it'll be very interesting to see if they acquire, or whether they add, or whether they try and be more competitive. It's going to be very interesting to watch Disney over the next.
Well, we've been
months.
Talking about this for a couple of years. I believe that this is the year that Disney gets sold.
Yeah, it may be
up that way. Their stock is set up for a way that they can be easily purchased. It's not like New York Times or anything like that, where there's all kinds of complex rules on who owns the company or who owns the company.
Right.
So I think
same with Warner Discovery, by the way. Same with Warner Discovery.
Exactly. But I think what's interesting is everything you said, I agree with, except when you look at what happened on with Amazon Prime Video watching, what they have found over and over again is the more people that watch stuff on Prime, they're better shoppers. They're more loyal shoppers. They
twice
yield
as much. They spend twice
exactly.
as much.
And Apple doesn't have to go there yet, but they will. And they'll realize that the more people that they can get watching their stuff streaming, they become a better customer of theirs. Apple, I mean, they have the best yields. They're a luxury brand, best yields in the business.
Yeah.
But it's not always going to be that way. And I think that they're going to have to take the next step to say, okay, how do we create a better moat around what we're doing? And I think that's where Disney comes in. I absolutely think that Apple is looking at Disney right now and saying, we have an opportunity at a severely discounted price to buy maybe the best IP in the world. Yeah. And a streaming platform that's already good to go.
Yeah.
And there's a great overlap between Disney and Apple customers already. So I think that if they look at that and they're serious about it, they already can afford it. They have the money to do it. It'll get approval by Disney if Apple comes to the table. And I think in late 24 is when you're going to see Apple finally consummate that marriage that was meant to be from the very beginning.
There we go. There we are. All right.
I didn't even expect to say that. It just naturally came up in conversation.
Of course. Well, you can't help yourself. That's the problem, is you literally
because
can't
it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer.
It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Why is Apple not creating more? All the stuff that we're talking, they know what's going on at Amazon. They know the people that watch that streaming stuff, that they become better customers.
Look,
why doesn't Apple do more of that? Because
I don't think Apple wants to be in the theme park business. Apple does not want to be in the theme park business. It does not. It clearly doesn't want to be in the experience business, right? It just clearly doesn't.
Oh yeah, because if they did, when you go to Apple headquarters, they'd have some kind of an experience besides,
which is another prediction you've made. Yes, exactly.
But what I would say is there's a play here for Apple to come in and take the streaming business and leave the parks for somebody else.
I don't think so.
And
no,
Iger has been coming in to make a clear separation on those businesses. You can take that.
He's not going to break it up and sell it for parts, though. No, no way. I cannot see that happening. I'll bet another steak dinner on that.
That experiences business is completely separate. You can have all
Agreed.
sorts of deal. You could have all sorts of deals between the IP that goes to streaming and the IP that goes to the events businesses. It's not going to be a problem.
I don't disagree with that at all, but I just don't think they're going to do it. I don't think he's going to break it apart.
Who? Iger?
Break it apart.
Iger was brought back in to split it apart.
No, he wasn't. No.
They're like, Iger, save us.
He was brought in to sell it. I think that's true. He was brought in to sell the thing, but I don't think I just don't see that happening. I don't see that happening with the legacy of Disney, of them breaking apart the Disney experience of the parks with the IP of the content. Those two things are too intricately locked.
Nobody in the going to Disney World is going to know a difference. That doesn't matter at all.
It does matter, because if different companies own it, then it becomes a very tenuous relationship.
I don't know. I think it's.
Yeah.
I think that
I wouldn't take that risk. Ooh-wee. Are you kidding me? I buy the parks and without the IP to back it up, and basically then somebody else is going to own the IP for the content that I'm leveraging.
You've convinced me. Apple's going to keep the parks, and they're going to create the best new experience that's ever seen. You go to Apple headquarters.
Oh my gosh!
And you're going to have the Steve Jobs experience.
Wah, 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 wah,
that's
wah,
all I
wah,
got.
wah. It's Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. All right.
I can't wait. I cannot wait.
Yeah, you cannot wait.
Cannot wait till you eat crow.
Yeah, I will eat the crow, literally live here on YouTube streaming.
That'll be a special episode, folks.
A special episode.
Oh, it's going to be the best episode ever.
All right, let's move along here to something. We're going to link in the show notes, because this is a really cool story that you should go read. We don't have time to cover it, but it basically CNBC has announced that it will debut its first paid course as part of a new educational venture. And it's basically, it's called How to Ace Your Job Interview. This is their first course, which is basically going to provide interview tips, tricks, insights into hiring managers, and guidance on how to handle tricky interview questions, and just a really interesting education. It's a paid for course. So this is CNBC branching out, getting into online education. Fascinating media company doing this, offering up educational products. Fantastic content marketing example. Or a productization of media, sort of the opposite of content marketing from a brand perspective. So go check it out, read it, and know about it, because it's really interesting. But let's get to our question. We have a wonderful question from our audience member, from our friend and family of the show, Robert Riggs. And I think you've got that teed up, yeah?
I've got it teed up. Let's go.
Howdy from Dallas, Texas. This is Robert Riggs with the True Crime Reporter podcast. Joe, you mentioned a couple of episodes back about attending Author Nation and how some of the authors are using Kickstarter and other means to raise money from their fans and their readers to underwrite their books. Would you expand on that, what you heard there, and what are the best platforms for doing that? I'm interested in trying to do that for some of my podcast series. Also, I could not agree with you more about your 2024 prediction on print. I did an experiment in 2023 where I gave away a true crime column twice monthly to a very popular weekly paper here in Dallas. Because I'm giving it away, they included a QR code to go straight to the subscription page of my podcast. It has worked. So 2024, I'm expanding this. I'm working on deals with other papers around the country, as well as magazines and some regional websites. And I would think for your listeners that are in online marketing, certainly some of these business journals would really welcome free content, because they just can't afford it. They need it. I look forward to your responses. Happy New Year.
Any chance we can get him? You're right. I mean, it's like any chance you get him on the show. It's like,
if one of us, for some reason, can't do the show one time, I think we should just have Robert Riggs.
Robert, come on. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Maybe you do have the Robert show. Robert
or he just takes my place, right? I mean,
well,
because it would
yeah.
be easy for you to remember the name at that point.
Yeah, of course. With my memory
Yeah.
issues,
Yeah,
you're absolutely
that's
right. Robert, first of all, thank you for the question. Yes, I went to Author Nation a month plus ago, if you will. And by the way, the Author Nation is the new name. It was called 20 Books. I think it's 20 Books. Yeah. So, anyways, they changed their name to Author Nation. The point is, I sat through dozens of sessions. And what's amazing with all these authors, and most of them are fiction authors, they were all talking about direct sales of some kind. And when I say direct sales, it wasn't just selling their book directly on their own website. It was doing something like you're talking about with Kickstarter, which I'll get to in a second, or putting their own membership sites together, anywhere that they can have a direct connection with their reader. And not that, I mean, there were 30, 40 people from Amazon there. It's not that there were still sessions on how to get found in Amazon. But I have never seen, Robert, I've never seen something switch so quickly from, oh, I've got to make sure I understand Amazon and get my book out to Amazon, toward how do I deliver this unique experience to my readership and at the same time get that direct connection like we've been talking about with social media since forever. So it's interesting that move has been made, and Kickstarter is a great place. I actually had this keyed up. I wanted to see if I can bring this up, so I'll show it here. If you're on the YouTube channel at This Old Marketing, check this out. So this is Brian Kofsky, one of our. Is it Brian? I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, Brian Kofsky shared this with me, Robert, and I had not seen this example. But this is Brandon Sanderson, who's a fiction writer, and he launched this Kickstarter program, and he launched it last year for his 2023 books, and he put together a whole series of things that would happen in 2023 if you signed up and supported. I think he had a goal of like a couple 100,000, and which is significant, right, to get a number of followers to sign up. He ended up having 185,000 backers pledge $41 million to his Kickstarter page. And by the way, this is very elaborate. You get, you can get there's packages from just getting the ebook all the way to, $500 where you're getting all the formats, where you're getting special print productions and all that. I mean, it's substantial, and probably at this point would cost him $1 million to put together, but there's $40 million left over, really significant. And it doesn't have to be just books, right? Robert Riggs, you mentioned podcast. You can do this for getting a podcast off the ground, for any kind of new project, whether it's one of your true crime shows that you're trying to get off the ground, where you can go and target your current audience with an offer and get them closer to some kind of experience that you can offer that you're not offering to other people, and giving them limited access to something. This is really something else. There's a lot of other things out there than Kickstarter. I'm familiar with Kickstarter. I know some of the folks over there. I really trust what they're doing. I really like their focus on the publishing market in and of itself. So I think that's interesting. So I would recommend Kickstarter from that standpoint. So it's just this focus on direct. And it's not that you ignore Amazon or B&L, Barnes & Noble, or anything else with your books, if you will, from that standpoint. It's that's not where you're targeting your current fans. You don't want to send your current fans and followers off to another platform to buy your stuff where you don't get the direct connection, you don't get the data, and you don't get half the revenue. You want to keep that revenue for yourself. So a lot of people are doing that through direct sales like Kickstarter, or selling from their website. The other thing I would mention, what was the other question on print? Really brilliant. And when I talk about print, for the most part, especially coming from the brand magazine side, I often talk about launching your own magazine, which of course I think is an opportunity. But I think what you're talking about, I think, is even better, and it's a little more feasible for a lot of thought leaders out there. Is their media relevant to what you're doing right now in your market? Of somehow they're all having trouble with their business models. We've talked about it many times on this show. The traditional media, especially on the print side, magazines or newspapers, are having problems, and they're looking to do what ESPN did, where they're saying, we're going to get rid of some of this high price talent, and how do we leverage influence and creators out there? So I think that there is an opportunity, like with what you said, to go after some of these print magazines. When I was getting started, I had deals with 2 or 3 magazines where I would write a monthly column on content marketing, and that was a way for me to get out in front of new audiences, and it was sort of a barter share, and it worked really well. So I would look at those opportunities right now, and I think there's probably more of those right now than I've ever been before, because of the fact that those media companies do need content and they don't want to pay money for it. They can't pay money for it with the business model. I don't know if you have a take on that, Robert.
No, I think that's right. I think the partnership idea is huge, and I obviously would agree with everything you just said. I mean, you know much more about this than I do, but the only cautionary thing I would put out there is the natural tendency is to look at this Kickstarter thing and say, "Oh, this is something we can do regularly." It's like, I don't think you can. I think you can do this once or twice, or certainly not very frequently. So if you're going to do it, make it big, go big or go
big.
home and make it a thing. And don't think about this as like, a way to pay the monthly bills kind of thing.
Well, I talked with the Kickstarter. I had a call with them a couple months ago just because I was fascinated by what some of these authors and content creators are doing. And they were saying that it's project based.
Yeah.
So like if you're going to do a documentary, or
Yeah.
you're going to do a one-time report, it doesn't work as well for ongoing content initiatives. It doesn't work as well for podcasts, although they do have podcasts on there. But if you're going to do something for a podcast, you would do something like the first season. You'd do it like that. Keep it project based and not like an ongoing thing. And I think you'll be more successful with it.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that question, Robert. And as always, the dulcet tones of your amazing voice. And by the way, if you have not looked at his podcast, it's an amazing podcast. But so just a shout out for that as well. All right. Very quickly here, Rants and Raves. I'm going to go first. Okay. And so that we get to Rants and Raves and stay a little bit on time here. So the article that we'll link to in the show notes is going to be from Digiday. And the article is basically coming out of CES. So it's the news coming out of CES. And basically the headline is, we're in the middle of a storm right now as Google phases out third-party cookies. Dun, 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 cue dramatic music, cue everybody with the sort of, Home Alone emoji, shocked face. And the article opens up by saying, changes in the wind as digital media sectors descends on the halls and meeting rooms of the Consumer Electronics Show this week. The impact of Google Chrome withdrawing support for third-party cookies will be a consistent topic of conversation among this cohort as each prepares to an entirely different business reality in the next 12 months. For some, the following year will see a renewed period of mergers and acquisitions. And basically, it's been quiet in the ad tech front. And according to this week's annual market report by investment bank Luma Partners of the Lumascape fame, total global deal value in the space, that's the ad tech space, by the way, fell to a 10-year low in 23, with global deal value dropping below $3 trillion. With 17% decline from the prior year. Basically, the article goes on at some length, by the way, to talk about the acquisitions that are happening, the deal sizes that are happening, and everybody waving their, it reminds me of the scene from this is going to date me, the scene from Stripes, or not Stripes, Ghostbusters, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. So Bill Murray. And so, here's the thing. We have been, it's probably nauseating to hear this again from me and us and out there, that we've been talking about Google deprecating the third-party cookie for years. And it's finally happening here. And so anybody who's caught unaware or surprised by this is just fooling themselves and hasn't been paying attention, because this has been coming for some time. So hopefully those that are in the ad space, and we're starting to see a lot of change right now because of this. One of the things that I wrote about last week and for CMI was about sort of the re-rise or the repopularity of attention metrics. And now with AI and with things like visual eye tracking and things like that, publishers, media companies are bringing back attention metrics, the old attention metrics from years ago, but now sort of supported with new technologies that can track those things for things like brand recognition, brand recall, product recall, and those kinds of metrics that are becoming so important because we're becoming less able to track, all of this sort of surveillance-based data, third-party data that we have before. And Google, once it starts to deprecate this, in full stop, that's really just going to exacerbate that thing. So the lesson is, if you haven't been doing this, pay attention now, because this is brand advertising, sort of run of sight, all those kinds of things are going to become much more popular again as this startup becomes a thing. We're going to start to see a lot of new sort of jazz hands as it pertains to, well, we can track the user data this way, we can track user data that way. Pay less attention to that than how do we start creating deeper level brand experiences that basically we can pull people into. We're going old school with this advertising thing, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody.
No, I wasn't surprised at all.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. No, anyone that's like, oh my God, what's going on here?
It's the whole oh my God thing. The sort of tenor of this article is, oh my God, nobody told us that Google was going to deprecate third-party cookies this year. What are we going to do? What's it going to do to the market? What's it going to do to the ad tech market? It's like, it's been doing it to the ad tech market. Yeah. It's last year was a great indicator. The year before that was an indicator of that. And it's just sort of like it reminds me so much of the record companies when they just sort of refused the idea of digital music and how it would change their industry. And they just sort of kept, saying, not on my watch. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to deal with this. And then all of a sudden they had to deal with it. And so it's on us. It's coming.
Yep. It's here. All right. I love it. Okay. Here's my let me put this article up here. This is from CNBC. And the title is 43-year-old used her life savings to open a bar that only plays women sports. First of all, I love this idea. Been extremely successful. And here's my rant with the article. So the sports bar is called the Sports Bra, which I think is just
cute.
Fantastic.
It's cute. No, it's cute.
But listen to this part of the article. Here's my rant. The writer says, business has been good despite the niche business model and record inflation. But the whole despite the niche business model, that's why it's successful, because it focused on a particular audience wanting a particular thing instead of focusing on everyone.
Right.
And it made me think of the whole idea of let me get rid of this one so we can chat about it. But it's the whole idea, and many people have said it, but I'm thinking of when Ann Handley said, if your content is for everybody, it's for nobody.
Right.
It's the same type of thing. And I don't think a lot of people realize this. And this woman did a great job in launching the sports bar that only plays women's sports and caters to a very particular part of the market and can serve that market better than anyone else because nobody else is there. And right. It's funny. I have you seen the movie Elvis, the most recent one?
No, I didn't. I've seen the trailers for it, but I never
Tom
watched
Hanks
it.
in it. It doesn't matter. Yeah. At the end of it, they show some clips from Elvis Presley's life, and President John F. Kennedy at the time, when Elvis passed away, said that Elvis was more unique than anyone else, and that's why he made this impact. You couldn't get Elvis just anywhere. He was unique in and of himself. And I thought about that over and over again. And I think that's what we as content creators, as content marketers, need to focus on. We really do need to be different. And we have to rise above all the content clutter by focusing on a different audience with a different content niche that doesn't get caught in the clutter that's out there right now. And I love this example for that nature. And that's where the writer gets it wrong. Because if you just said 43-year-old launches a bar, that's the story, right? Nobody's going to cover that. The story is because she is doing something different that's not being done. And I think we all have that opportunity. And I think we just need to think, I mean, the biggest issue that you and I run into when we talk and we consult with people on their content initiatives, and we look at it and we say, well, how is this any different than the 50 other people in your industry and what they're doing in content? It's not.
Right.
So just stop it. Just stop it. So anyways.
Yeah.
Congratulations to her name's Jenny Nagayan. I think it's Nagayan or Nagayan. So she created the Dream Bar and did it in 22 and already doing more than $1 million. So congratulations to her for thinking a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's a cool idea. It's a very cool idea. And it brings it highlights so many things, and it is a cool, it's a cool niche. It's really a cool way to do it.
That's why ESPN, the Ocho, would be successful too.
Yeah, right.
We need to have more of that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I don't know, water polo playing squirrels or something like that. I would love to see that.
There you go.
Who wouldn't? Who
you
wouldn't?
could do a ChatGPT image of that for sure.
water polo.
Water polo playing
that will
squirrels.
be my actually I think that what I'm figuring out, I'm trying to figure this algorithm with our titles, and the weirder the titles, the better they do.
Yeah.
So I think
that's right.
if our title was water polo playing
squirrels, it might work.
maybe would you be okay with that? I'm just going to do
course.
that and see what happens.
Yeah. Just see what happens. Water polo playing squirrels, right?
It's gonna
and
be our
everybody will
watch
be
it.
listening to the entire episode till they get
It's
to
like,
the
where does this come in?
1 hour and 9 minute mark.
This is gonna be
before.
good. Yeah, and that's a really that's the best use for Dolly.
That's right.
For AI creation is to
Totally.
give them something weird like that. I'm sure the
Totally.
squirrel will have like 17 fingers, but other than
Yes.
that,
I have
gonna
been
be
getting
super
so into that,
interesting.
by the way. I have been getting so into that. Every time somebody posts an AI picture, I ask for all the, I want all the story. My first comment is always to get the stories behind the story. You know,
Yeah.
why does the person in the back left have 3 legs? What is that, a raccoon on the wall? Is that
so weird?
why is that book glued to her hand like a surgically, it's like why are they all zombies? What happened to why is their face melting?
For our Happy New Year podcast, I did, the one that we did had the little baby on the front. The little baby had in one of the pictures had 6 toes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, not that it's not possible to have 6 toes, but why is it always an extra digit?
That's right. It's amazing. And by the way, here's my favorite. You just ask ChatGPT or Dolly for a group of business professionals, a group of young business professionals, and then insert doing something, editing a document, working on a whiteboard, eating in a cafe. I guarantee you, all the men have beards. Every single man has a beard. Yeah, all the men have beards. And the first one you're going to get, by the way, are all white guys. And then if you go, can you make the group of people more diverse? Then you get crazy diversity, right? But it's fascinating to me. This whole AI art generation thing it's fascinating to me. I mean, it definitely has a look to it. It's easy to spot.
We'll be looking back.
That way.
It's like, hey, Sonny, remember when our AI art used to have 6 toes? Those were the good old days.
Those are the good old days when Baby New Year had 6 toes. And we had water polo playing squirrels.
Remember that squirrel? I loved him. That little squirrel.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Diggy the squirrel. Okay, I'm done.
Oh gosh. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to the show this week. We will be, of course, back next week with a wonderful new episode. And until we see you next week, just remember, everybody, it's your story to tell. Tell it well. We'll see you next week on This Old Marketing.